Welcome to another video. Guys, I appreciate all of you who tune in to my videos. I realize I've got 2 subscribers at this point, very few viewers. I'm just getting things up and running. So I am very thankful for all the views that I get. And if you will, please just give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or even leave a comment. That way I get some feedback. So guys, we're going to talk a little bit about the wealth inequality issue. I get it. It's something that is up and coming. It's something that a lot of people have a lot of feelings about, a lot of opinions about. And I'm going to spare you guys all the statistics, the graphs, and everything else that are probably just skewed anyway, right? Unless I do the research myself, I don't even want to go down that road. But I'm going to take a little bit different approach. And so who am I? I'm nobody. Just like I've said in my other videos, I'm nobody. The only thing that I can do is give you guys my perspective from the life that I've lived and the life that I'm living now. And if you're just now visiting my channel, I am in the Philippines. I'm from Oklahoma originally, and I have been in the Philippines for the last 4 years. And so this is a subject that is very near and dear to me, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I've been watching videos and I've read the book from this gentleman by the name of Gary Stevenson. He's got a YouTube channel and he wrote a book, and I bought it through Amazon, got it delivered to the Philippines, and finished it in about 3 days. It's that good of a book. I highly recommend it. It'll give you a different perspective because Gary is like a lot of us. Guys, I'm not a rich dude. The reason I live in the Philippines is for economic reasons. It's because I couldn't afford to retire in the U.S. That's a topic for a whole nother video. But my point is, I'm one of you. I'm working class. I grew up blue collar, and so did Gary. He grew up working class, and he was very fortunate enough to get to work for Citibank. And if you want to know all the dirty details about him, just go watch my other video. But Gary has been making the rounds. He's been on Piers Morgan. He's been on several other podcasts, and he's had a lot of critics, and he's also forming a movement. He's from the Ukraine, and it's starting there, but it's also come to America, and here I am, an American in the Philippines, and I'm talking about him, and I'm going to continue to talk about him because he is putting things in perspective and blue-collar terminology, and he's helping us all to understand why things are the way they are when it comes down to the economy, why we're so frustrated right now, why we feel like we're not good enough. Gary's answering those questions, and I applaud him for his effort, and I'm going to try to do my best to help him out here. So all of you guys watching this video, that's where we're going from this. And I'm just going to tell a little bit about my stories because I think that's the best way people learn is just by learning about other people and hearing their stories. You know, it's something we don't do a lot nowadays is we don't know our neighbors. We don't know the people we work next to. We're too infatuated with those electronic devices that are constantly taking our attention away from anybody around us, and we just don't pay attention. And it's time we start doing that. Well, instead of fighting that, I'm just going to use that electronic device you're probably watching me on right now, and we're going to talk about these things. And so I'm just going to tell that story as if me and you were just sitting at the bar, or we're sitting at dinner or something like that, and we're having this discussion. So that's how I hope you guys take it. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to try to pigeonhole me into one political party or the other. That's just the way it goes. It's the propaganda and the rhetoric that we have been spoon-fed over the last 40 years, and we all believe it. If somebody doesn't believe the way, 100% the way that I believe, I'm going to be like, well, you must be one of them, or you must be one of them. Instead of realizing that, hey, there could be people in the middle. And that's me. I'm the guy in the middle. I've always been politically in the middle. I'm not extreme one way or the other. I'm not extreme liberal. I'm not extreme conservative. I do live my life and my social activities. I try to live those about right of center. But I also have the mindset of live and let live. You know, there's certain things that you can talk to people about and you're never going to change their minds. And religion is one and politics is the other. So I don't even want to go down that road. A lot of you guys are going to try to say, well, you're just a socialist. You just want to take away from the rich and give it to the poor, and that's socialism. And that's exactly what it is not. And I am absolutely not a socialist. I can promise you that. I'm very much a capitalist, but I think that there needs to be some controls, because what we have been seeing over the last 40 years is this dissension into no controls over capitalism, and we're right back to where we were pre-1929 when everything went to hell, when the stock market crashed and we went into the Great Depression. And so let's talk a little bit about history for just a minute. So I am a Gen Xer. You know, I'm not a boomer. Some of the young generation will say, well, you sound like a boomer, you look like a boomer. I get it. But I'm not a boomer. My parents were boomers. And my grandparents were the Great Generation. They were the ones that grew up during the Great Depression. In Oklahoma, you didn't have just the Great Depression, you also had the Dust Bowl. You know, farmers lost everything. I can remember my grandfather telling me about living on buttermilk and cornbread. And if they were going to have any protein or meat in their life, they had to go out there and hunt it, kill it, skin it, and then cook it and eat it. You know, and that could be anything from squirrels to possums to you name it. Anything that had meat. That was the way it was during the Great Depression. Do your research on that. Look it up. Look at history and see what life was really like. There's lots of good stories out there and a lot of writers who have written good things. A lot of good stories about the Great Depression. You know, like the Grapes of Wrath. So educate yourself on that. And then think about this while you're educating yourself on it. Could I live in that? Could I live during that time? Well, if we don't start dealing with wealth inequality, we could very well end up right back to where we were. History does repeat itself. So guys, I grew up in a blue-collar household. My mom and dad were born in 1946, right after World War II. They graduated high school in 1964, the year after Kennedy was assassinated. And my dad refers to those years as the good old days. And why were they the good old days? It's because a man could go out while his wife stayed at home and took care of the kids and was a homemaker, and he could go out and he could earn a living by himself, and he could buy a home, he could buy a car, he could take care of things. He didn't need to work 2 jobs. His wife didn't need to work 2 jobs. We didn't see the things that we see now, right? Your dollar went further. And those were considered the good old days. Well, when you really look back into history, it's a rare phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that happened after World War II. It lasted about 3 decades. And then after about 3 decades, it started the decline. So this is one of those really rare times in world history where there was the poor actually became a separate class and became the middle class. They didn't know what a middle class was in world history up until that point, right? It was just the rich and the poor. So this is a phenomenon. And it is something that we are trying our very best to grasp onto, to hold on to keep that dream alive. And it's slowly just slipping through our grasp. And why? because the rich just keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And they have gone to all kinds of extremes, the rich have, to make sure that we stay that way. What have they done? They've stagnated our wages. They use propaganda and rhetoric to keep us fighting each other instead of fighting them. Instead of us grabbing the pitchforks and the weapons of death or the tools of death, they keep us fighting each other so that we don't go after them. That's a fact. I mean, think back to the French Revolution, right? And that's what I'm referring to. So they're doing everything they can to keep our attention diverted. They want to shake the keys over here while they're over here getting richer. And that's the world we've been living in for the last 40 years. All the time while they've been sitting around going, well, no, just keep giving us more and more breaks. Let us do business our way, and we're going to trickle down that wealth to you poor and your middle class. Well, if that's a fact, they've had 40 years to prove it. 40 years to demonstrate how our lives can be so much better under their way. And it's not happening. It's not happening at all. Matter of fact, life just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Life keeps getting harder for the poor and the middle class. And that's where guys like Gary Stevenson, he made his money. He made millions betting on this, that the economy would continue to get worse and worse, even though the economists of the day were saying, no, everything's getting better. Look at GDP growth. Look at all this. Look at these statistics. And he's sitting there talking to his friends back in Essex going, and his friends are telling him, oh, yeah, we had to sell the house to pay for this because, whatever. Or we had to, life sucks. We can't even afford to pay, feed our kids. And he's seeing the realities of life of the poor, life of the middle class. He's looking at the realities, a life that these billionaires have no clue. Most of them have never lived like us. They have never worked with their hands. They've never had calluses on their hands. Few of them have even broken a good sweat unless it was on the tennis course or if it was a little hot on the golf course. Much less come and live like we do. They're so out of touch with the common man that they have no freaking idea. The only thing that they rely on are these statistics. These statistics by people who are bought by politicians and by the rich and everybody else that say, oh yeah, everything looks great. Everything looks great. Yeah, we just got to keep doing what we're doing. The economy is getting better and better every day. But in the meantime, life for the poor and the middle class just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And they just keep telling us, well, the only reason your life is worse is because you're not working hard enough. And they tell you, you're not working hard enough. Well, I can tell you this, from my family's experience, my dad was a ceramic tile setter. He crawled around like a bug for most of his life. And what I mean crawl around like a bug, he put floor tile on the floor. So he's on his hands and knees working all the time. And if you've never done that for 8 hours a day or longer, it sucks. It hurts. Your knees hurt. Your back hurts. Your wrist hurt. Everything hurts. And a lot of these people have no idea what that's about. But that's what my dad did for over 40-something years. Most of his life. Most of his life he did that. And then he taught me and my brother the trade. Now, me and my brother were lucky enough to get jobs after the fact that got us out of the trade. But we were both in it long enough to realize that this sucks. And the wages just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And what I mean by that is when my dad, in the 1980s, he was getting $2.50 a square foot for his labor. So each 1 foot by 1 foot piece of tile he put down, he was getting $2.50 a square foot. That was put down and grouted. Now you try to get that, you're not going to find it. The wages have actually, in the tile trade, gone backwards in the state of Oklahoma. It's horrible. It's gone backwards, and that drove me, my entire family, out of the trade, out of the business. It's not that I didn't like it. There was always a sense of accomplishment whenever I would go lay a whole floor, a kitchen floor, and it looked so pretty and it looked so beautiful, and I was wiping up that last bit of grout off the, when I was cleaning the grout on the floor, and I looked back and nobody had even stepped a foot on this floor. Nobody had. Not even me. And I look back and I see that sense of accomplishment, and there was always something rewarding about that. But whenever you get that paycheck, and it was less in 1993 compared to what it was in 1987, that sucks. That's terrible. And that's the realities. And I'm sure a lot of you guys probably have story after story after story where your wages have either gone down or they've at least remained stagnant, while the rest of the economy has quadrupled. And what I mean by the rest of the economy is the rest of the consumer items that the common folk buy, the working class buy, like groceries, gas, vehicles, because you got to have a vehicle in the United States unless you're living in like LA, Chicago, or New York. You got to have a vehicle to get back and forth to work. And then you've got health care, and you've got everything else that goes along with life. Everything is quadrupled in price, and wages have remained stagnant. That is a result of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. It doesn't mean that my wages went backwards, but in some cases it did. It just means that my wages stayed the same, or they went up by a few pennies, where the rest of the economy quadrupled in price. Your dollar does not go as far. And where my dad talked about it in the 1950s and the 60s, your dollar went a lot further than it does now. And so getting back to this whole idea of, well, you just need to work harder, right? We've all heard that. We've had how many entrepreneurs, you can go all over YouTube and TikToks and everywhere else, and you can see people, well, you just need to work harder. You're just not working hard enough. Oh, you've got to put in the hours. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who lives in Australia. Me and him were in the same field. We were both in police work. So he was telling me that making $1 million nowadays is nothing. And I was like, well, it is for me. I've never even come close. And I was telling him how since I've moved to the Philippines, I actually have more wealth here. And what I mean by that is I've got a little piece of land with a house I've built on it. And then I've got about $4,000 worth of guns back in the United States sitting in a friend's safe that I can't send over here to the Philippines because it's against the law. And then I've got a little bit in an emergency fund, and that is my wealth. But you know what? It's more wealth than I ever had back in the United States, because everything that I made, everything in my paycheck that I made was gone. It went for something. It went either to a mortgage or vehicle payments or food or you name it. It was gone. I never had the opportunity to save hardly any of it. Everything was gone, paying bills. That's the American rat race. And I was able to escape from that. Well, here's the kicker. I make less than half in retirement now than what I made when before I retired. Less than half. But I live better. And why is that? It's because the cost of living here is a lot cheaper than it is in the United States. Now, why is it cheaper? It's because I live a more simple life, a life that a lot of you guys would not live. I'm having this conversation with my friend, and we're talking about wealth. And he sends me this picture of his, I guess it's something to do with property tax in Australia. I don't know. But he was talking about how his land, the value of his property has gone up over 100,000 Australian dollars from the previous term. And I don't know what their term is. I don't know what any of that stuff is. But I was sitting there going, and I already know my friend. He owns his house outright. He doesn't owe anybody for anything. And I'm like, well, good Lord, look at your wealth. You know, your wealth just went up over 100,000 Australian dollars in 1 year. Man, you're freaking golden. You'll be a millionaire if you're not one already. And so he made the statement, being a millionaire is nothing. And I'm like, well, it is for me. And he also said, well, I've worked very hard to have what I have. And I said, so did I. And so I have a lot of people out there. And this is the problem of wealth inequality in this bad apple that we've all been fed. Just work harder and you can have this or you can have that. You can be a millionaire or you can be successful. No, that's not true. If hard work actually equated to riches, these coconut farmers, these fishermen here in the Philippines would be multimillionaires, and you people back in the West would be the poor people. Because I guarantee you, y'all don't work near as hard. Y'all don't work near as hard. You look at these coconut farmers out here. They're climbing coconut trees that are almost 100 feet tall. 100 feet tall. They're climbing them barefooted. They're getting up there, chopping, harvesting the fruit off of it. And then once the fruit hits the ground, once those coconuts hit the ground, they're spending hours and hours and hours to get the parts of the coconut separated out so that they can sell them piece by piece, either making uling or charcoal out of it, or they're sending the copra, the meat, to another distributor, and so on and so forth. So you people back in the United States can put coconut on your German chocolate cake. But these people over here are doing well to make maybe $6, $7 a day being coconut farmers. Would you work for that? Would you do that? Would you climb a coconut tree over 100 feet tall on your bare feet in the heat of the tropic sun and then sit down there with mosquitoes biting you and everything else, separating those pieces of that coconut out? You wouldn't. But they're only getting paid about $6, $7 a day. My point is they work 10 times harder than most of you people that are CEOs or whatever. Even have a good paying, just normal job up there where you're making a 100K or whatever in the United States. These guys work way harder than you will ever think about working. Way worse conditions. And so if hard work equated wealth and equated riches and equated success, these coconut pilots over here, these coconut farmers, they should be the billionaires. So there's one myth that we've already dispelled just by simple common sense. You don't have to go outside the United States to see that. Some of the hardest jobs I ever had in my life, I was labor construction. And I didn't get paid anything. While I sit around and I watched, like the job I was doing was next to a golf course, and I'm watching these rich cats out there playing golf while I'm working. Well, if hard work equated to millions or success, then I should have been the one making all the money while them guys out there playing golf shouldn't have been making anything. So it's a myth. But it's a myth that we have been force-fed and we've been spoon-fed, and we believe. We believe it to the point where it causes us mental health problems when we don't think we are doing enough. When our family suffers because we can't go buy things for a school project for our kids. Some of you guys know more than I do. I lived a much better life than most of you guys watching this video right now. Hard work does not equate wealth and opportunity or any of that. Hard work is just hard work. And I'm not discounting hard work. I think it's admirable. I think the crime is that you don't get paid enough. So anyway, let's continue on with this wealth inequality, right? So what happens when it comes to fruition? We saw during COVID the largest increase in wealth upwards. In other words, there was more wealth that transferred from the poor and the middle class during COVID to the billionaire class than we've ever seen in world history. During those few years of COVID, we saw more wealth get transferred up. So what happens when I am this entrepreneur and I've started up my little 5 and dime store over here? What we call in the Philippines is a sari-sari store, or a ukay-ukay, or I've got me a little grocery store over here. What happens whenever I have no customers? I don't have anybody that has any money to buy anything from my entrepreneurship. What happens? My business goes out of business. And so I'm going to refer you guys back to the Philippines where I live. That's the problem that we have because of wealth inequality here in the Philippines. So I may have one of the best business ideas in the world, right? Shoot, I come over here, I'm from the West, I've got lots of business ideas, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I am going to open up a pizza joint, because here in the province of the Philippines where I live, right, it's hard to find good pizza. Most of the pizza you're going to find has like Eden, or it's kind of like Velveeta cheese on it. It doesn't have true mozzarella. It might have some pineapples and some Spam on it. Something like that, right? It's actually not too bad once you get used to it, but it's not what we're used to in the West, in the U.S. It's not good pizza with good mozzarella on it. Now, if you go to, the bigger cities like Cebu, Manila, Angeles City, you can find good Western style pizza. But out here in the province, you can't find it. So I've had this business idea. I'm going to be an entrepreneur because I have economic freedom here in the Philippines, right? At least my wife does. We can start a business. It's very easy to start a business. People start businesses every day out here in the province. No problem. They got economic freedom all day long. They've got more economic freedom than what you'll find over in the United States, over in the West. There's a little bit of bureaucracy you got to jump through, but not like there is, okay, I want to start my pizza joint in Oklahoma, right? Well, I'm going to have to deal with the city. I'm going to have to deal with the state. I'm going to have to deal with the Department of Public Health. I'm going to have to I've got all these different things, these different agencies I'm going to have to deal with. Over here in the Philippines, I might have to deal with the municipality and I'm done. I can start my business. I've got more economic freedom and more entrepreneurial freedom here in the Philippines than I will ever have over in the West, in any part of the West. And I get it, the United States is probably more free than it is in Europe. Even Singapore, I don't know. So I opened my pizza joint up. Well, to make a decent quality pizza and sell it for any kind of a profit, what am I going to have to do? Let's just take a gander at, one of the cheap chain pizza places. And that's if I can get the economies of scale on my ingredients, right? So you want to look at some of the big dog pizza places in the West, right? I'm not going to mention any names, but they have stores everywhere. So they can buy their flour, they can buy their mozzarella, they can buy their tomato sauce, they can buy their pepperonis and all that kind of stuff. They can buy those from their distributor at a reduced price because of economies of scale, because of the volume of the amount they're buying. But let's just say that, all right, I've got that same economies of scale over here in the Philippines, right? So let's say I've got this product that I can put out for sale that's going to be about, I don't know, let's just say, we'll be even be gracious here. Let's just say $4 or $5 per pizza. You know, you can buy a cheap pizza in the United States for what, about $5, I think? I don't know, at least that was 4 years ago when I left. It's not a good pizza, but it's edible. And you know what? They can sell them and they can make a profit on it, right? So let's say I can do that here in the Philippines. I can sell that piece of pizza, that pizza pie, for about $4 or $5. How many Filipinos do you think are going to buy it? I'm going to tell you right now, nobody will. And you know why? Because the average daily wage is about $6 to $7. So let's say I go out there and I've been working construction all day long and I make $7 as my daily wage. Do you think I'm going to go spend $4 to $5 for a pizza for my day's wage? No, I can't afford to do that. Not when I can go buy me some rice and I can go to the reef and I can pick up barunai or tibu-tibu, some shells, and I can have a fine meal for my family. Or I can go kill a chicken and I can grill that chicken up with some rice for a lot less money. What I'm saying is there's going to come a point in time when there is no customer base and everybody goes, well, just work harder. Oh, start your own business. Be your own boss. Do this, do that, right? You'll be rich. Life will be so much better. But then when you do, there's no customers because everybody's poor. Nobody's got the money for that. And that is what we run into here in the Philippines. You may have the best business idea, but if you can't get the price of that product or that service down to where your typical Filipino can afford it, your business is going to fail. And that's the end result of wealth inequality. Now, are we getting close to that in the US or the UK or Europe or whatever? Not quite, but that's the end result. When the gap between the rich and the poor is at that degree, you can't even start a business because nobody can afford it. So how much do you people pay for your Starlink service in the United States? About $100 a month? Something like that? I can guarantee you I pay half what you pay because Elon Musk cannot charge the same amount here in the Philippines. He can't do it. Nobody's going to buy it. He's already not doing good business here because it's too expensive. When people can go out there and get basic cable service for a lot less, why would they buy Elon Musk? Why would they buy his service? They're just not going to do it. Even though he's got a discounted price. Same thing with Netflix. I pay a lot less for my Netflix account than you people in the United States pay. Because they have to price it that low. And they still can't sell it like they do in the United States. That's where we are headed if we don't stop it. So what's the solution? Gary Stevenson says, tax wealth, not wages. I agree with that. I think that we have got to start taxing because here's the deal. If the billionaires and soon to be trillionaires, we've given them 40 years to trickle any of their wealth down so that the rest of us can at least keep up with the rate of inflation, right? And they have failed to do that. We've given them 40 freaking years, if not more, to make that happen. It's been a failure. They're not doing it. So why should we trust them at this point? Do you really think these billionaires, out of the goodness of their own hearts, God bless them, are going to say, you know what, we've been making way too much money. It's time we start paying our employees better. It's time we start, helping our employees out. No. Look what's going on now. Shoot, we got a billionaire sitting up there as a special government employee, firing everybody, making the unemployment rate even higher, firing all these federal workers, and then demonizing and vilifying them. We've got all kinds of politicians doing that. People that are just going out there to make a living. That's craziness. So instead of trying to do the right thing and going, you know what, it's time we pay our employees a living wage. It's time we pay our employees enough to make, to get by so that they can own their homes too, send their kids to school, afford health care, all these different things. What are we going to do? Nah, we'll just put the richest sucker up there and let him start firing government workers. But my point is, the billionaires, they are not going to do it out of the goodness of their own hearts. So then they want to sit and they want to criticize us. And they want to like, well, I've worked hard for what I have. Oh, really? Well, did you work harder than me yesterday? No, we've already discussed that one, right? If hard work meant wealth, these coconut farmers over here in the Philippines would be they'd be millionaires. So we know that's a myth. And so when these billionaires want to sit there and go, well, you want to take from me through taxes. You want to take what I have worked so hard for. But it's okay for them to take what you have worked so hard for, the fruits of your labor, they'll take them in taxes because that's patriotic. Oh yeah, to be a good patriot, you got to pay your taxes. You got to pay your taxes, man. I just saw a recent report where a lot of these millionaires are not even filing their taxes because the penalty for not filing is only a misdemeanor. But the penalty for filing a false income tax report is a felony. So they're just not filing because they'd rather take the misdemeanor. And what's being done? Nothing. Do you think the IRS has stepped in there and arrested anybody, taken anybody to jail, done any of that stuff? No. So now we've got a whole group of people, millionaires all the way up to billionaires, that ain't even filing their taxes, much less paying them. That's a fact. That is what's going on. I've been over here in the Philippines for 4 years, right? Have I been enjoying the fruits of my tax? No. So the roads that you people drive on, all the government services that my tax money here in the Philippines goes for, in the United States, I don't get any benefit from that, but I still pay my taxes. And you know why? Because I don't want the IRS coming after me. I don't want them locking up my passport so I can't travel somewhere or do whatever. I don't want them putting a warrant out for my arrest for tax evasion because they'll do it to me and you. Why haven't they been arresting these millionaires for doing the same thing? Because of money and power. So if they're not going to do it themselves, we are going to have to find ways to tax them in ways that they cannot get around. And okay, so we tax them. And then that money goes to the government. Well, guess what? The billionaires own the government. And this is something Gary Stevenson does not address. And it's something that needs to be addressed. Okay, we tax them. We tax their wealth. We tax their profits. However you want to look at it, we tax them. So what happens with the money? Well, it goes to the government, and more than likely it's going to go right back to the billionaires through their contracts and everything else they got going, through defense spending, you name it, pharmaceutical companies, you name it. It's all going right back to them. And they know it. Instead of going for things that will benefit the poor and the middle class, like infrastructure projects. That's why our infrastructure, that's why the road you drive on in the United States are so crappy. There is no public transportation. There's none of that stuff. I guarantee you, in the province, out here in the country in the Philippines, I've got better public transportation than you guys have in most of the United States. In this poor, third world, developing country, however you want to label it, I've got better transportation here. Public transportation. It's crazy. And it's because your politicians and the rich are just hoarding all that money up there in their level, up in their atmosphere, and they're not giving any of it back down in any kind of form. How many people have health insurance or have health benefits that the government takes care of? You know, we don't have that. So my friend that lives in Australia, and we had this conversation, that's something he has. He doesn't have to worry about bankruptcy if a serious illness comes up. And so for him to make that statement of, well, making $1 million is nothing nowadays. It is for an American because we don't have health insurance. We don't have government-assisted health insurance. We don't have it. Or health care. So yeah, it is catastrophic if one of our family members ends up with cancer. If our kid gets hit by a car or comes down with some kind of an illness or anything like that, it is catastrophic. That's why Americans go bankrupt over medical debt. That don't happen in a lot of the Western world, and they don't understand that. It's crazy. It's absolute craziness. So what is the solution, guys? The solution is, yes, we are going to have to tax the ultra wealthy somehow, some way, shape, or form. No matter how they try to avoid paying those taxes, we're going to have to tax them for it. And people will say, well, then they'll just leave. Well, they can't just leave. They're making their money off of the consumerism of the American middle class and poor. They can't just leave that. Oh, they can leave and physically leave and go to another country, but their profits are not going to leave the United States unless we allow it without being taxed. So tax their profits, tax their wealth, tax however you got to tax it, but you're going to have to stay on them because you know why? They can hire a slew of accountants and lawyers to try to circumvent paying their taxes. They've been doing it for years. So guys like me and you, the working, we can't do that. We can't hire an accountant. We hire an accountant to tell us how much we owe the government. That's about all we do. And then paying that accountant $250 every tax season is another kick in the freaking butt, right? But these billionaires, they can afford to do it, and they can pay the lawyers to go with it, and then they can pay to tie it up in court. And nowadays, they just don't even pay their taxes. They don't even file them. That's how they're handling it. So we've got to find ways of getting that tax money from them. One way or another. You can do it at point of sale, or you can do it with profit taxes, income taxes, wealth taxes. There's several ways to skin that cat. But you're also going to have politicians who do not turn around and give that money right back to them. You're going to have politicians that say, no, this money is going towards the poor and the working class. And if you don't, it's all going to go right back to them. And so we got to have politicians that we can trust to do this. So how do we do that? Well, right now in the United States, we have two parties. Because those two parties have made sure no third party can even come along. They have messed with election laws, with ballot access laws. You name it, they have done everything they can to keep any other party, independent, libertarian, whatever, off the ballots. And it works. If you don't believe me, follow the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You may not agree with where he's at right now. I don't either. But if you followed his candidacy during the last election, you'll see the troubles that he went through. And it was from both parties. So they have made it extremely difficult to have anybody else come in and compete against them. That's the world we live in. So let's just say we can start swinging that pendulum back the other way towards the middle again. It's probably going to take 30, 40 years just to get it back to the middle. Because we're going to start at the grassroots level and work our way up to find politicians that are going to be worthy enough and that are going to be willing to serve us as public servants. And until then, we're just peeing in the wind. That's all we're doing. Just pissing in the wind. We can tax the wealth of the billionaires all we want, but we've got to have some authority for people who tax that wealth to make sure that money goes in the right place and not in some rich person's hip pocket. And when we find those people, we need to ensure they stay true. We need to ensure they stay uncorrupted. And how do you do that? You have stiff freaking penalties. You know, in the United States, I know in the state of Oklahoma, it's a felony crime for a police officer to take a bribe. It's a felony crime for a citizen to offer a police officer a bribe. But it's okay to bribe politicians. We do it every day. It's done every day. Politicians are bribed every day, all day, and it's perfectly legal. We've got to put a stop to that. I know the Supreme Court's ruled on it. I get it, and that's why it's going to take even longer to get the pendulum swung back to the center. Because we have a lot of obstacles that have been put in place over the last 40 years to make sure that we get things back to middle. I'm not talking about going socialism. I'm not talking about going, the other way. I'm talking about things just back to the middle so that everybody has a chance. The American dream has a chance to exist. We got to have politicians that we can trust to do this. And we got to have consequences for that. So my suggestion is this. If you're a politician and the populace elects you into their service, because you're a public servant at that point, and you betray that, that is going to be a punishment that is very, very severe. We need to have severe consequences for this stuff and not just sit and allow it. So guys, if we don't do something about this, we're all going to be living like we did during the Great Depression. Now, as for me, I'm very fortunate. I've got a Filipino wife. I live in a place where I can go out here on this beach and I can go hunt for food. Yeah, I've got options. I'll survive. I'll live. So will the people around me. You folks back in the United States, I'm not so sure you will. It's going to be really tough. There's a lot of you guys out there that are gun nuts and, y'all talk a good talk and you can do this. Half of you can't even get out of your freaking lazy boy because you're so fat. I don't know how in the world you're going to go out there and walk a field or walk in the woods for hours and hours until you find something to shoot and kill and then drag that thing back to the house and process it. It's going to be really tough for you. So these are things you really need to start thinking about, especially if you're a young guy. You better start learning you some skills. Or think about this. Let's start working now. Instead of fighting each other, it's time for Americans to start coming together. Because in the numbers, we can win. If we have the numbers, we can win. But divided, the house will fall. It says it in the Bible. It says it all over all kinds of ancient scriptures and writings and everything else. A house divided cannot stand. And that is a huge truth that we have forgotten. So if the poor and the middle class want to stand and we want to last, It's time you quit fighting each other over these stupid little things that are going on and quit believing the propaganda and start realizing, you know what, my neighbor's not too much different from me. I don't care what he voted. He's my people. These people over here, they don't know anything about me. They've never lived a life like me. And maybe it's time that I'm like, okay, neighbor, what can we do to change the situation? All right, guys, I appreciate y'all listening to my video / rant. I've got more to come. I got a lot more to say about this stuff. And I appreciate y'all tuning in, and we will catch you guys on the next video.